Hello, welcome back, my favorite movement enthusiast. Today will be all about opening our hips. Maybe we'll even bulletproof our hips, because these exercises are not only about flexibility and stretching, but also about strengthening the muscles that surround our hips, so we can work on our hip mobility on a bit of a more effective level than just pulling on our hip flexors and hoping that that takes care of things. When we talk hip mobility, we have to think about our glutes, we have to think about our quads, we have to think about our abdominals, especially our lower abdominals. We also have to think about our spinal erectors. We want to go through all of these together for maximum efficiency. You might be thinking of exercises like this one, or this one, or this one, or this one, the old scratchy. But we want to include exercises that work on both strength as well as flexibility, taking us through long ranges of motion, but also short and controlled ranges of motion. Let's get started by just laying down. All we need to do is grab both our knees with our hands and start doing tiny rotations. Now, this is not about increasing your range of motion yet. We just want to start feeling the muscles we're about to work with. Not only that, but we also want to start activating them through controlled movements, meaning most of the work is coming from your legs and from your knees. Your hands are only there for supportive guidance. Circle in one direction, circle in the other direction. Over time, you can increase the range of motion of this movement. You want to have complete control over the movements we are doing and replicating these patterns into both directions as symmetrically as we can. Now, for a second, we'll move away from the circular exercises to combining internal and external rotation. Turn to one side and turn to the other side. Open up your arms, keep both shoulders completely on the ground and switch positions. In this case, we're working with our glutes, we're working with our spinal erectors, and we are stretching our obliques as well as our hip flexors and our lower abdominals, releasing some tension in and around our hips. So let's add to this and combine the last two exercises, internal and external rotation. Pull those legs in and switch to complete contact on the other side. Move to the right and complete controlled circular motions. Now, this exercise is amazing in teaching control of all the musculature surrounding our hip, as well as increasing our range of motion through a controlled and dynamic fashion that also helps us build a lot of strength in our core, because these movements require a lot of strength if you want to do them correctly. Which moves us to the last exercise here on our backs before we move on to the next starting position, which is pulling in both our legs, putting them on top of each other and going for one singular static stretch. Right hand, left knee, pull both legs all the way to the side. And now we want to start increasing the spinal rotation without having our shoulders leave the ground. We're going to hold this one for 30 seconds. Once we have gone through the one side, of course, we move on to the other side. Another static hold of 30 seconds. And once we've gone through that and we've limbered and loosened up our spinal erectors as well as our glutes a little bit more, now we can finally move to some of the more advanced exercises that are a little bit more demanding. So we're going to get into our first lunge position, and we're going to combine both strength as well as control with flexibility in a single movement. So we're pushing forward into our lunge, starting to elevate, hover for a short period of time, and then reverse. We're also rolling over our toes backwards, going through ankle flexion as well as ankle extension and lengthening our hip flexors by pushing our hips forward. We are still hovering, we are keeping our balance, we are working both strength as well as flexibility in this movement alone. On one hand, in the extended leg, we are working on our posterior chain, and once we move forward, we are strengthening our anterior chain as well as lengthening it and pulling a little bit more here. Now we can add to this movement, sit back, push forward, hover, stay in a strong position, standing here, and start extending your leg once more. Now these exercises are way more effective when it comes to building mobility than it would be to just sit there and hold this statically for 30 seconds. Of course, you're gonna lengthen your quads, you're gonna lengthen your hip flexors, there's no doubt about it. But when it comes to efficiency, there are way more efficient ways to work on our flexibility. So let's add another layer to this exercise. We move into our lunging position on the back of our foot. We are pushing forward, we're holding the hover for more strength in our quads. And now while rolling backwards over our toes, sitting down all the way, we're gonna go into a forward fold as well. Keep in mind, the closer you pull your toes towards your head, the more you're gonna have an added stretch in your lower leg musculature as well. So move forward all the way, rolled over your toes, lengthening your foot musculature, and then moving forward into our lunging position, once more pushing our hips forward, and then reversing into the forward fold bend right here. I've been getting like 110 degrees in here, and I think she's not enjoying it. It's really hot. It's so hot. Now that we've activated, warmed up, and loosened up a little bit, we can move on to some things a little bit more advanced. However, you can always stop at the level where you are at, repeat those exercises a little bit more, and then come back to the more advanced exercises once you have the required mobility for these. And the required mobility for this one is being able to sit upright in a Turkish seat, because we're gonna extend that leg outwards, and we're gonna move from here into a hip thrust or a semi-hip thrust or a pseudo-hip thrust, whatever you want to call it, and reversing all the way, sitting back down and repeating the process on the other side. Now with pushing from here over our legs, through our glutes and rotation in our knee and hips, and once we are here, we want to move outwards laterally, opening our hips even more, and if you want to, and if you have the range of motion, push them forward to open up your hip flexors just as well. Sit back down completely, pull that leg in and switch directions. Roll over your knee with your hip joint, move laterally, push forward and reverse, pull in that extended leg, and we're gonna repeat one more time on the other side. We require a lot of strength in our hip flexors, in our quads, in our abdominals, especially the more we want to sit upright, and then we're gonna require a lot of control from all the musculature that surrounds our hip to move us forward, laterally, and even more forward. Sit back down and pull in once more. Now this wouldn't be a hip mobility routine if we didn't also work a little bit in the deep squat or from the resting squat as a starting position. We sit up, switch into our deep squat position, and reverse the movement into the other direction. We've got internal and external rotation in our hip. So we have extension in our ankles as well as flexion in our ankles. And I have been repeating this exercise so many times, not because it is the most fun, but because it is the most effective. The range of motion you can add from here to all the muscles you need for hip flexibility are just insane. You can add your lumbar and even thoracic mobility, lengthening your quads, your hip flexors and glutes even more by getting your upper body all the way down to the ground, and you're using a lot of strength and a lot of control to move from this position back into the other direction. Pull yourself over, go all the way down, and reverse the entire movement. Now you don't have to work too dynamically. You can just switch it up and try and relax at the lowest spot for a couple of seconds. Take a couple of deep breaths and then control the movement into the other direction. Now we only had a handful of exercises, but combining these into a complete routine is absurdly effective, especially if you only take like 10 minutes every single day to practice these moves. I can guarantee you, not only will you be relieving pain and relieving tension and tightness, but you're also going to be strengthening all the muscles that are later going to help you advance your hip mobility even more. And this is how we bulletproof our hips, not through stretching and pulling on a muscle, but through combining strength with flexibility and control. And while I know that usually when it comes to mobility, we tend to focus more on the stretchy parts, the other two aspects are just as important, because just stretching is not gonna keep your hips healthy. It will not, but strengthening, stretching, and working on your control over the musculature surrounding it will definitely, over time, increase your range of motion and help you get rid of all the problems associated with tight hips and hip injuries. Sadly, however, this is all the time we have left for you today. I have to be in work in half an hour, so I'll get going. But if you like the video and subscribe, and check out other videos on this channel, because we literally have new ones every single day. So until tomorrow, Captain Cairo, peace out.